Five, four, three, two, one.
Hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba. It's time for the Armist Inquisition yet again, episode 223 on Sunday, the 13th of March, 2022. I'm Amish Phil.
I'm Amish Ben.
I'm Amish Matt.
The dwarf, the cripple, and the mother of madness.
And we've got Bill with us from 13 Questions Podcast. How are you doing, Bill?
Hey guys, good. Thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure.
You're welcome, Bill.
I've seen you've been popping up in the chat every now and again and chucking some stuff in the Discord every now and again and sort of being a part of the magic.
Yeah, making the podcast happen,
Yeah?
basically.
Yeah. So how did you get into podcasting? What does your journey into podcasting look like?
Well, my journey started with 13 Questions. And, well, I guess, before that, I was a listener of Grammarica, and which is a podcast based in Canada. Darren Grimes and Graham Dunlop run that show. And Darren started a side show called 13 Questions, right? So that's where I come into play. He's got a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, so he needed some help, and I volunteered to step in and just kind of he let me take it and run with the idea. So it's been great. And that started in 2019. So not too much longer after, before that is when I became a Freemason in 2017. So it was a topic I've always been interested in. And when, Phil, you've been on 13 Questions before, so we know each other from there. And then I heard you had another Freemason on the show. So I thought, hey, if you want to talk about this,
Yeah, you dropped us a message on Discord or something. It might have been in the chat. I can't remember. And I'm always open for talking about Freemasonry.
Yeah, we can't stop you talking about it, can we?
Well, consider I know pretty much nothing about it. Because, people call it a secret society, but the way I've heard it described is a society with secrets.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If it was so secret, I wouldn't be able to talk about it, right?
Yeah, I was reading a book recently by Robert Lomas, who's one of the he's quite a well-known English author as far as the history of Freemasonry goes. And he's quite open about what he writes in his books. And the way he sort of describes it is that basically the only things that are off the table are the modes of recognition. But other than that, you can pretty much, in fact, wasn't there something about opening the lodges a while back where they invited people in to see what was going on?
You can find all of the questions about ritual on the internet if you want to know, because I did the exact same thing before I joined. So,
well, you want to know how many chickens you're going to have to sacrifice, don't you, before you sign up?
I wanted to find out about the goat, So, yeah, but I wouldn't recommend anybody do that if you want to join, just because you'll ruin the experience. You'll spoil this the surprise. It's supposed to be a metaphor for a journey, right? So, when you watch a movie, you don't want to skip to the ending scene. Spoiler alert, right? So
So is it, because there's lots of different sort of flavours of Freemasonry, what are you in? Is it York Rite or Scottish Rite or?
Scottish Rite. I went with Scottish Rite only because my Blue Lodge, which is first, second, and third degree, they called it Blue Lodge, was kind of a feeder. It was in the same building for the Scottish Rite Valley in Indiana, which I belong to. So just because we shared a building, I just kind of slipped right into the Scottish Rite line. The York Rite was kind of dying off in my area, really. So I didn't really have the opportunity to so much. And so That's I guess my Masonic career thus far. Yeah. So yeah.
So I was going to ask then. So are you allowed to say how many people are in your lodge or how many members there are?
Yeah, sure. We've got like less than probably 30 guys at this point.
Right. Okay. So I was just wondering then, kind of mentioned that the York Rite was dying off, did you say? So is this kind of I think this has happened in the UK as well, where Freemasonry is getting sort of less and less members, I guess, or, people that sort of like joining up. Is that a similar sort of case?
Yeah, for sure. It seems to be a dying hobby, really. I was the youngest guy in there for a few months, really, but a younger guy did come up, but that was it. And that was in 2017. And I've been keeping tabs. I moved recently, so but I've been keeping tabs on my mother lodge, and we were not raising a lot of Master Masons. And the ones that we are, at least that I'm aware of in the line, are older, like retired people. This is something like retired people do now, right? It used to be something that families would get their kids involved with, like with the Day of Malay societies, which would be like Boy Scouts, like an actual Boy Scout, Masonic Boy Scout program. Like the Masons to me is just a morality Boy Scouts program for men. Really?
Yeah, that's we alluded to that with our previous guest, didn't we? About whether it was kind of turbo scouts for adults.
Absolutely.
Depends what you want to get out of it, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah, what you make of it, right?
I mean, I think I said last week, like there'll be different reasons for people joining. I think back in the 60s and the 70s, a big component would have been networking for tradesmen and plumbers.
Well, that's certainly sort of like the impression that I had of it in sort of like growing up, that it was kind of I don't know.
Shout network.
Yeah. or mainly like coppers, like police, basically. Police officers would join, and it was like it was
very much a middle class thing.
Yeah, and a handshake and a wink.
Yeah.
And you got away with stuff, or or you got better deals or things like that. Or contracts, that kind of thing.
I always thought you couldn't join; you had to be invited, and you had to have some sort of skill that you could bring to the lodge and share trades and whatnot. But
right.
I had no idea, clearly.
No, but the networking thing is still a big draw. That is one reason, like one group of, I don't know if you want to categorize people that join the fraternity or not, but there are people that are looking just for, fellowship and networking. And then there are other weirdos like me that are more into the esoteric side and things like that. And fun fact, I believe the last time I checked that all of the founding members of the Order of the Golden Dawn were all Masons. So like anything magical is, you'll find all of those guys there too, right? So it's a mix. It's a very eclectic mix. It's interesting.
That is interesting that there is definite parallels and connections between magic and Freemasonry. Why? Why would that be?
I think, the main story which Freemasonry tells is the tale of Hiram Abiff. And I did catch your episode with the other brother that you had on, another Freemason. You guys were talking more about architecture and kind of the history of it and whatnot, which ties into the history of it does tie into to magic, I'd say. Just looking at King Solomon's temple, which is King Solomon is a character in the play. So the third degree tells specifically. The first two are leading up to the third one, but yeah. So in that tale, in the Master Mason degree, makes references to building, the murder of Hiram Abiff, who was hired by King Solomon to help build the temple in Jerusalem. And it just so happens I was looking into this this past week, actually. Solomon was, we all know he was in Jerusalem, right? And has lineage to Noah and whatnot, and Moses. Well, they kicked out the Canaanites to get the land, right? So
yep.
The Canaanites that's another name for the Phoenicians. right? Which is where the city of Tyre is located, which is where Hiram Abiff is from.
Yes.
So and there were 12 generations between King Solomon and the time that Moses got to the promised land, right? So essentially what happened was the Israelites kicked the Phoenicians out of certain occupied lands, and then they waited for 12 generations and asked for help to build this immaculate temple. And so that the magical things just stems from the stories in the Bible. King Solomon was supposed to be this dude who was able to command demons and stuff, and be all stories. There's a bunch of stories about that character. So let your imagination run wild, and this is how you end up with things like the Order of the Golden Dawn and anything of that nature, really, because it branches off from there. And before, kind of a precursor to Freemasonry in my mind, it would be like the Rosicrucians, the order, that order. And there's always been kind of a underlying alchemical hidden knowledge to this, because it does deal with numbers, right? So we're talking about geometry, and which speaks to a language that is more or less transcendent, I'd say. I think especially when you get into the quality of numbers, right? We're not just talking about the quantity, right? And 5 is always going to be 5, but what about the quality, right? What does that convey to us? And I just picked 5 for a random reason. I was looking at my hand, right? We got 5 fingers. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
can't remember what the question was.
No, neither can I.
I love the sort of, well, it's like the mythology behind it all, isn't it? And I don't know why, but I've sort of developed this obsession over recent years about the history of Judaism and theology more generally, and that sort of epoch. And because it's so important and it's so foundational to the lives that we live today, our entire Western society is built on this foundation of the Judeo-Christian ethic. And so it's incredibly important, and there's so much mythos that surrounds the subject that it's interesting that Freemasonry chose that for its foundation myth. It's obviously sort of harkening back to that time. And it's interesting you mentioned the Canaanites. If it's assuming that it isn't a myth and it did actually happen, the whole Hiram of Tyre and Hiram Abiff and King Solomon, it must have been pretty weird for Hiram Abiff to be returning to Jerusalem to construct a temple for Yahweh when, his ancestors, who will have been worshipping presumably Baal and Ashtaroth and all these sort of pagan deities, to be returning and then building a temple for Yahweh. That must have been a kick in the teeth.
Yeah, that is interesting. Especially is taking into account the story between David and Goliath. Like, he was a Philistine, which I believe is just another name for Canaanite. So taking giants into account too, like why and then like I said before, the 12 generations. Like, why would these people be helping each other? Like, that's weird, right? I was thinking about that too. Like, I would say that maybe it's they're both aware of a shared history that is maybe censored from us, or not, maybe kept from us, not purposefully, I don't think, but it's hidden. It's because we can discover it, right? Like, I just freaking found out all these things about giants just this past week, right? And here I am talking about it. So, and we can find this stuff out, but What
have you been finding out about giants, Bill?
Oh, just like that they built, that they helped build the temple that the Jews used, the second temple of King Solomon. Like, that was a thing. It's in the historical record.
Wow.
They were giants. Like, it's like, to me, that's not up for debate.
Now, when you say in the record, so what is this in the Bible, or is it in some other sources, or who's writing where the record's coming from? Do you know?
Well, I could
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Well, no, just by going off of the stories told in the Bible.
I'm a big fan of the Nephilim, you see.
You do like the Nephilim, don't you?
Yes.
That goes back to pre-flood times, right?
Mhm.
And the whole Genesis 6 conspiracy. Have you guys talked about that at all?
We had Ken Ami on, didn't we? 2 years ago, and he's just having none of it.
No,
It's like, whoa.
He specifically came on, didn't he, to tell us that there were no giants.
There was no giants post-flood.
No.
See, it's interesting because you can spin this any way that you want. Like I could take the story of Noah and turn that into this dude coming in to Earth from a spaceship, right? Because of the flood, the waters of the heavens above the firmament or whatever. That could be a spaceship. So, depending on how you translate your sources, you could come up with any story you want, really. But what's the truth? I mean, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And giants seem to be, I don't know why, but it seems to be something that's censored because the Smithsonian Institute here in America, is everybody that's done a little bit of truth research into the giants and Smithsonian knows that the Smithsonian Institute scoops up these skeletons and we never hear about them again. But you can find old pictures on the internet of people that taken living giants taken next to, of course, these are called anomalies nowadays, but that doesn't explain why they would need to mass manufacture weapons on this size that archaeologists are digging up and whatnot. I'm a big archaeology geek too, so
cool. Just
by hunting around on the internet, doing research that way, looking at old pictures, really. And I got a buddy that does stolenhistory.net website. They curate a lot of interesting info on a number of topics, really, not just giants, but just internet researching. But I don't know if I answered your question, but
you should get Gary Wayne on 13 Questions.
I'd love to. Yeah. In fact, I think I put him on my guest wish list after.
Yeah. Our guest wish list is ever growing.
Just goes on and on and on.
Yeah. We need to do 5 podcasts a week to even get close to.
Yeah. But our listeners need to donate more money before we can do that. But we'll talk about that more later.
Yeah. You're on the value for value model, aren't you, Bill?
Yep.
How's that working out for you?
That's
fucking shit, innit? Fucking shit, innit? I want to bend over and let Jeff Bezos just have his way with me.
Well, Live Nation was going to offer us $10 and you said no to that.
I know, on principle. You must be doing better, Bill. Go on.
This was a paid, actually 13 Questions was a second hour type situation when Darren conceived of the project, but when I took over, we agreed to make it value for value. And I think since then we've had one person sign up for a monthly donation. So
yeah, it's
that isn't what is important. What is important? It's truly a labor of love, and I love talking to people, especially across the pond. I love the difference in culture and different perspectives, and apparently different time zones don't like.
Just going back to Freemasonry, you said Scottish Rite. Is that the one that goes up to 33 degrees?
Oh, it goes up to 32. 33 is more of an honorary degree, to my understanding, and in order to get 33. You basically, it's just a recognition of this guy has done a ton of work for the fraternity in some capacity. A lot of 33 degree members that I know of have been lodge secretaries for a number of years, which is an office within the lodge, which we elect, at least here in America, we have elections to put those people into office. And this one, because it is more or less of a, you don't really want a transitory secretary. You want somebody that knows the connections between the Grand Lodge and your lodge and other lodges. So the person that volunteers for this job oftentimes does it and it takes on more or less a second job in doing so. Wow. So just to recognize things like that, people will receive the 33rd degree. The 32nd degree is the highest that that any run of the mill person can just go sign up for and get these, right? So 32 would top out unless you want to sit around for 15 years and wait for someone to nominate you for this 33rd degree. That's the way it works, to my understanding, at least.
So you have a secretary. Is there sort of three leaders, if you like? You got worshipful master and secretary and something else, is it?
We have worshipful master, senior warden, junior warden. Those are kind of the three officers of the court, so to speak, because the inside of a lodge room is very reminiscent of a courtroom, and I believe there is a reason for that. But we might get into that later. But the lodge secretary and the treasurer, they kind of sit off in the corners behind the master of the lodge. So yeah, they're near him and up front, if that answered your question.
Yeah. Well, again, it's the three is symbolic, and it's sort of analogous to the three people behind the construction of the temple: Solomon, Hiram of Biff, and Hiram of Tyre. It's the same. It was the same with the Royal Society when that was founded. They had I can't remember the name of the president, was it? Can't remember. And then two wardens. Oh. Seems that a good chunk of the Royal Society founders, of which there were 12 originally,
Holy Trinity,
had Freemasonic foundings, and they took a lot of principles from Freemasonry. So one thing you're not supposed to do, as far as I'm aware, in the lodge bill, is two things that are off limits: the discussion of politics and religion. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that strictly applies to while lodge is in session. And while lodge is quote unquote in session, we're conducting business on like how much money did we bring in today or this month, and how much did we spend on bills? Were there any brothers that needed a charitable donation? If so, how much did they get? It's so in my experience in stated meetings, which is what we call them here, we hold them once a month, and it is literally just a business meeting. It's very dry and boring. So unless you have a reason to bring up, something like politics or religion for a practical purpose other than just debating it, like don't do that. Other people, because people are here as, they got other shit to do too, right? Let's get our business done and leave. It's not. It's more administrative than anything, right? Really? We also, vote on new members and read petitions and stuff. So other stuff is accomplished. It's not just counting money. Don't get me wrong. That's the most boring part of the meeting is the treasurer's report. So,
are you allowed to talk about the voting process?
Yeah. What do you want to know about it?
Well, I'm sure I read somewhere that the term blackballing comes from the way Freemasons vote someone in, so it has to be unanimous, doesn't it? And that's well, you explain it, Bill.
Yeah. So we have a ballot, and in the ballot is a box. It's a wooden box, and it's full of black orbs and white cubes. Right. Weird, right?
Square in the circle.
So a yes vote is a white cube,
right?
And black is black is a no.
Oh, so you're blackballed.
Yeah. So if you get a black, it has to be unanimous. So if you get one no, that's not good. It's
a lot of networking you've got to do then.
I don't think so. I think
no. You're right. That's the other thing. I didn't know anybody in my lodge when I joined. I simply asked for a petition, and at the end of the petition, towards the bottom of the piece of paper, you need signatures, right? And I'm like, well, I don't know anybody. I don't know any Masons, and they just signed it for me. Like, I just met these guys. Like, oh yeah, we'll sign it. Don't worry.
We're desperate.
Yeah, you're the youngest person we've seen for 30 years.
Yeah, man, I was like 20 years younger than those guys, for real.
Because I think back in the day, you would have had to have a sponsor of some sort, or like Ben, you intimated maybe it was invite only. I mean, maybe that was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people's like dads were Masons, right? Yeah. So it just kind of was a family thing. So that would be your sponsor, kind of like how Catholics kind of have the confirmation, the sacrament of confirmation. You need a sponsor for that. it's kind of the same thing. It's more of a symbolic, somebody that you know. I mean, it's just part of the process, right? It doesn't, to me anyway. It's not important really, because then you get, after you are accepted and voted in, you get a mentor who is helps you with memory work to in order to advance degrees. You have to memorize a bunch of stuff. So the sponsor can often times become your mentor afterwards. Mine were completely all different people. So I guess it really just depends on how connected you are to the fraternity when you're starting off with, would be my conjecture. Can you hear me?
Yep. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned about it being in session and being a bit like a courtroom.
Yeah.
What's all that about?
Yeah.
What's all that about?
I was going to look for the three great lights, actually, because you had mentioned three. I've actually got this little book here called the Indiana Monitor and Freemason's Guide. And we get this after completing our third degree, and it's all in plain English, so it's not in cipher, which is what they make us use to memorize a bunch of stuff, which is fun. In here, I'm surprised at the amount of information that is just laid out and completely. I was given the okay to like read from this thing if I wanted to, right? So it's in no way like censored. But in regards to like the courtroom, you do have like wardens, like there's wardens in a courtroom, right? You have a junior warden and a senior warden, and these are more or less officers of the master of the lodge. The junior warden is in charge of the well-being of overseeing the well-being of its members. I can probably find the closing, like when we open and close, it might be in this book or not, but he's in charge of making sure that if someone's sick, you call this guy and he'll let the lodge know, and the lodge will, make sure you have enough money to pay your bills or whatever, right? Maybe your kids need to be picked up and taken to school, and they can help out with that. It depends on how tight knit your community is, right? But just go, yeah. So the courtroom thing, that's that. I think that goes back into more of the magical aspect of the fraternity, and really the magical aspect of courtroom too, because let's face it, I mean, there's a Bible in every courtroom, and so who are they deferring to, right? And that's what Freemasonry talks about, the grand architect of the universe.
Yeah, I mean, part of the thing in if you appear in court is swearing on the Bible, isn't it? There's nothing to stop people lying, but you're you're putting yourself at the mercy of a higher power in that regard when you give your evidence, aren't you? So a similar sort of theme.
Yeah, when you're in court, you're testifying, so you're swearing on the Bible. But if you break down the word testify, I think, and I might be completely wrong because I don't have sources for this, it's just the research I've done, but when a man went to testify in front of court, he would hold his testicles, and as a testament to saying that if I'm telling a lie, then you cut these off, right? So an interesting tidbit on that word.
Yes.
But yeah, also in Freemasonry, you don't have to use a Bible to take your oaths on, or your obligation is what we call them here. Your obligations on. It can be any book that you want, just as long as it is acknowledges a higher power other than the individual, right? It can't be an atheist. Is the main point here.
Right. Belief in a supreme being. So you could take your oath on the Quran or the Torah or Bible or whatever. I wonder if there's
No, go on, say.
I was just going to wonder if someone's like taken their oath on a copy of 1984 or something.
Well, you said
Very Pratchett.
Yeah, you were talking about when we were talking
A bit far away.
talking to David Harrison. You said he had said that there was a Wiccan had done it.
Wiccan? Yeah, I think he did, didn't he?
Yeah. So
I wonder what book they swore on then.
I don't know.
Aleister Crowley? Something? Transcendental magic?
Maybe. Yeah, but it was like he was just kind of saying it was just a belief in a higher power, wasn't it? Anyway, I just wanted to ask as well, Bill, you mentioned about a cipher. So before to get to your third degree, everything is in cipher. You have to learn.
Well, they give you,
You have to learn sort of like you have to sort of put things through a cipher to sort of decode it or whatever.
It's a exchange of questions and answers.
Right. Okay.
And the questions and answers, it teaches you like what certain symbols and signs mean that are used to convey the meanings of Freemasonry or whatever. So, and in order for it to be kept secret and make us feel special, we like to take one letter from each word, and that's what we use to read the question and answers. So we put them together, and maybe some words are capitalized to denote like, hey, this is the Holy Bible, like HB or whatever, right? So, and it really is more to facilitate learning. It's a learning tool.
Okay.
And because we want, I think the aim here is to actually teach people something, right? So, instead of how do you teach somebody something is through parables or allegories, right? And assigning meaning to symbols and whatnot. So there's just kind of, it's like rereading your notes if you're studying for a test, basically, because in some lodges you will be asked to perform this question and answer sequence in front of your lodge brethren during lodge in order for you to kind of progress to the next stage. I did not have to do that because my lodge was struggling. So,
and then part of that,
I did memorize everything though. So I did do that. They didn't just let me skate through. I had a good mentor that made sure that I understood everything as I was memorizing it. So I am thankful for that.
It was making me think of a bar mitzvah for some reason. And memorizing you do memorize something in the Torah or something for your bar mitzvah, and you have to stand up in front of your family and read it out, don't you? Essentially. It sounded something similar.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard.
Could be. I've never had one.
I've never had a bar mitzvah. I've only ever seen them on films.
So it must be true then.
So and TV shows too. Right. But I'm pretty sure you have to memorize a part of the Torah, don't you? And they sing it and in front of like your family.
Yeah, the memorization thing's a key part, and as far as I'm aware as well, Bill, part of that is that once you have these sort of modes of recognition memorized, that enables you to go to other lodges. So you can go to a lodge in another city or another state, and it stops you from going into somewhere where you haven't reached the appropriate degree or whatever.
Right. They also give you a membership card that you can just show.
Oh, even better.
Mason.
Is it biometric?
It's got a barcode on it, and it's all categorized in the database.
Does it link to your dermal microchip as well?
I don't know. I've got some profile on the internet under there for, I don't know. It's not anything. They don't have my DNA or anything like that.
Not as far as you know.
Yeah, right.
Ooh.
No.
But yeah, I don't.
How have you done much research into sort of tracking Freemasonry back through time?
Other than connecting King Solomon and giants and whatnot, like coming over from America.
That's a biggie.
That's a big jump, isn't it? From like 1717 to 900, 800 BC.
Yeah, so
about stuff in the middle.
The middle, yeah. Well, I think big chunk of that middle part, it probably has to do with the Rosicrucians. I think that there was kind of a precursor to really not all secret societies, but at least the Masons, because it's kind of referred to as the Invisible College. Michael Wan talks a lot about this. You guys familiar with Michael Wan?
Susquehanna alchemy.
Yeah. He used to have a series of videos on his website that kind of went into this, and it brought up one of the Bacons, Roger or Francis, and Shakespeare, and how they're related or had a hand in, not only writing the King James Bible, but in the Rosicrucians and the founding of America, and which leads us back to how Freemasonry got into America, which I did kind of earmark a page in this little book. We're just going to read from it because it does a nice little job of explaining. If I can find it. So give me just a second.
Funny you mentioned the Invisible College.
Did I?
No, Bill just did. Because
Yeah.
I mentioned the Royal Society.
Yeah.
Well, the Invisible College was a term coined by, I think it was Boyle, who was either in the first 12 members of the Royal Society, or he was shortly invested after that. And he came up with that term, the Invisible College. From the founding of the Royal Society, this period of the Restoration, just after Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell and all that.
Was he referring to an entity outside of the Royal Society?
No, apparently he was referring to the Royal Society. He called it our Invisible College. That's what I've read.
Okay.
But I think it goes back further. Like you mentioned Bacon. Bacon's a couple of decades earlier than that. And, tell you what. Hang on 1 second.
Oh. Getting some...
So when the Royal Society was founded, a couple of years after they were founded, they commissioned a history book to be written.
Right.
And I can't remember the name of the author. I'll find it out for a later date. But they had like a presentation copy given to the Royal Society a couple of years after it was founded. Mm-hmm. And the picture on the front of the book has, I think it's Charles II in the position of worshipful master. And then the two wardens, one is Sir Robert Moray, who was pretty much the founder of the Royal Society, and the other warden is Francis Bacon, who was dead by then, by maybe 30 or 40 years. So the Royal Society, Invisible College, they took a lot of their inspiration, it seems, from Francis Bacon.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. So it sounds like they just kind of made a claim and ran with it, which is, a lot to be said to that, actually. But as far as the actual, what was I going with that? Coming to America, I did find that page. Freemasonry comes to America, but the Royal Society. To my knowledge, like that wasn't that kind of created because the royals were kind of afraid of losing influence in the culture, so they made this propaganda machine branch arm of thing to promote themselves in society, right? Isn't that kind of like the aim of the Royal Society?
The main aim at the beginning was naval power.
Okay.
So what we're going? Where are we? We're about 1660, something like that. So the colonies are just about starting. The Dutch have colonies on the East Coast, New Amsterdam, and the French are active as well. The British Navy sucks nuts. It's terrible. And that was part of the inspiration for Robert Moray. He was also a spy. He was a spy. He was flipping sides between the English and the French. And it was during this period, towards the end of Cromwell and the Civil War, and then the restoration of the monarchy. So it was Charles II, when he was restored, he became the first patron of the Royal Society.
Who was in charge before him?
Cromwell. And then he died.
The monarchy, though, instead of...
Well, Cromwell was the... what would you call him? The Lord Protector. He was the emperor, essentially. The Charles I was beheaded. Oliver Cromwell takes over. We have a civil war, and then which lasts about 12 years or so. And then Cromwell dies. His son is no good, not up to the job. And then eventually the monarchy returns from France with Charles II and is restored. And so we have Stuarts back on the throne. So it's an incredibly turbulent period of history. We've just gone through 12 years of civil war. We've got Great Fire of London, Black Death, all happening at this sort of period. Restoration of the monarchy. And then you get this sort of underground movement, this congregation of scientists setting up with spies in them, Freemasons, how to build up the Royal Navy. It's weird. It's a weird period of history. But go on.
Where's Queen Elizabeth the First fall in the timeline?
She's earlier.
Like 100 years.
She's like the Tudor, back end of the Tudors.
Much earlier. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
so Elizabeth the First, the Virgin Queen, dies. And we've got a guest coming on not so long who says that the Virgin Queen Elizabeth I was actually the mother of Roger Bacon, Francis Bacon. But that's for another episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Elizabeth I dies, and she says, give the crown to James, the Scotch bloke. James, King of Scotland. So then James the Sixth, is it? Yeah, James the Sixth of Scotland becomes James the First of England, and we believe he was Freemason as well. James the First.
Interesting, because I know that Queen Elizabeth was in cahoots, so to speak, with John Dee, Dr. John Dee. Are you familiar with Dr. Dee and Edward Kelly? Yeah.
007.
Yeah.
John Dee, yeah.
Back to the whole magic.
First James Bond.
Oh.
Yeah. One of Elizabeth's spy masters. Yeah. Oh, yeah, he was into occult and magic and all the rest of it as well, wasn't he? And ciphers. But go back to Freemasonry going to America. How far back can we trace that to?
Sure. It says here in this little book, there has been much speculation concerning the presence of Freemasonry in America prior to 1717. But apparently, no acceptable evidence has been forthcoming to confirm this contention. It is known, however, that speculative Masonry, as represented by individual Masons, did appear in the American colonies soon after the first Grand Lodge of England was organized. These earliest American Masons were members of English lodges who had emigrated to the New World, and also colonists who had been initiated during their return visits to the mother country. Daniel Cox, a lawyer of Burlington, New Jersey, was the first Provincial Grand Master of Masons in America. Under date of June 5, 1730, he was deputized by the Duke of Norfolk, Grand Master of England, to be Provincial Grand Master for New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, quote, for the space of 2 years from the feast of St. John the Baptist next ensuing, end quote. However, historians have found no record to indicate that he ever exercised his powers. The first lodge in America, of which there is documentary evidence, was in Philadelphia as early as 1730. It held its meetings in Old Tun Tavern, apparently existing as an, quote, immemorial rights lodge. Such lodges were not uncommon in colonial days. In fact, the lodge at Fredericksburg, in which George Washington was made a Mason, undoubtedly operated by that authority. In 1733, another group of Masons in Boston had been meeting as an immemorial rights lodge. On April 13th of that year, Anthony Lord Viscount Montague, Grand Master of Masons in England, deputized Henry Price, a Boston tailor, as Provincial Grand Master of New England, and dominions and territories thereunto belonging. At the request of 18 Master Mason petitioners, Grand Master Price did, on July 30th, 1733, constitute them into a regular lodge. Later known as, quote, First Lodge, it is now St. John's Lodge of Boston, the oldest regularly constituted lodge in the Western world. And that's where I'll stop reading, because it does go on, and I've got cotton mouth. So,
well, there is this sort of thing that it's funny. It takes the Grand Lodge to be created in 1717 until all this sort of written evidence appears, and there's an element of there's political intrigue in all this because of the situation in England. and it goes back to the monarchy and Jacobites and stuff, and why Scottish Masonry was suppressed in a way from the late 17th century to the early 18th century.
Yeah, the whole Scottish thing is super interesting to me. That's the next paragraph in this book.
Yeah, the English monarchy, didn't want to give any power to Jacobites, Catholics. And so they sort of created I'm like talking like I know anything. They sort of created this Grand Lodge of England, and they put monarchy at the head, which we still have today. It's like can't remember who David said it is.
It's a duke or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a duke or something is the head of Masonry. And so that we have this sort of splintering off, don't we, between the Scottish and English Freemasonry. But I find it hard to believe that there wouldn't have been Scottish Masons earlier than that date, whatever it was, 1730, earlier, in the colonies.
Yeah. In 1754, another group of Masons in Boston applied to the Grand Lodge of Scotland for a warrant to organize a lodge under its authority.
Right.
Yeah. So accordingly, 2 years later, St. Andrew's Lodge number 82 was set to work under a Scottish charter. In 1769, 3 military lodges attached to regiments not domiciled in Boston united with St. Andrew's Lodge in petitioning the Grand Lodge of Scotland, requesting the appointment of a provincial Grand Master. The petition was granted, and Dr. Joseph Warren, who lost his life in the Battle of Bunker Hill, was made Provincial Grand Master of Masons in Boston and, quote, within 100 miles of the same. So it kind of goes on from there. But yeah, so there's two Grand Lodges. Then,
Schism.
England and Scotland.
Yeah. One of the big differences, it seems, is that going back to when the schism was, is that the English Lodge has always been headed by a member of the aristocracy or a monarch, whereas, as far as I'm aware, the Scottish lodges elect their leaders, and after a certain point, the Scottish lodges used to have a hereditary master, and it was passed down through the St. Clair family. You familiar with William of St. Clair?
I am familiar with that name, the last name, not the character in particular, but it is interesting that the difference between the two, your guest that you had on previously when discussing the history had mentioned that it was traced back to the early 1500s, which is the same date that I've came to in my own research. I've seen a document from like 1522 or something like that. I can't remember the exact date, but it was from a lodge in Edinburgh, right? So it's Scotland. So there's historical documents prior to 1717 of speculative Masons like starting to come into the fraternity, right? Or it's the fraternity is starting to evolve from operative to speculative as far back as the early 1500s.
Yeah,
from what I can see.
I think earlier, because William of St. Clair, who built what's it called? Not Rosebery Abbey up in Scotland from the Da Vinci Code. That chapel.
Roslin Chapel, which is just oozing with like Freemasonic symbolism, and we've got the two pillars there, the apprentice pillar and the master's pillar, and there is a carving somewhere which seems to depict one of the parts of Freemasonic initiation, and there's all sorts going linking that place to Freemasonry, and the Scottish Freemasons themselves say that the Sinclair family was their patron, was their leader, and it was passed down hereditarily through this family line up until this point where they got someone who wasn't fit for the job in maybe the 17th century, and that's when they made the switch to electing their head of Freemasonry. So, because I love this, because it ties into Knights Templars and stuff. William St. Clair. But I don't know, it's like sort of threads going back through history, very thin threads connecting things together, and it's hard to like sort of have hard evidence for these sort of things. I mean, it doesn't help that it's a society with secrets.
What
is.
What do you get out of it? What do you get out of it, Bill, when you go to the meetings?
Personally, what I've gotten out of the fraternity, I mean, I made a good friend that I didn't know before joining the lodge. We are both Dungeons and Dragons nerds, so we ended up doing a campaign together for a few years. So, I mean, personally, that enriched my life that way. I did spend a little bit of time in the officer line for the lodge, simply because they needed people to do that. So,
what does that mean? The officer line.
That means that you would assist in opening and closing the lodge, and eventually, if you stayed in it for a number of years, you would eventually get to be the master of the lodge, right? So you would go through, you would get to be in one officer seat per year, and then kind of move up the chain, move up the ranks until you're head honcho, and you get to be head honcho for a year, right? Which of course you must be elected to, but within lodge politics, it's kind of already understood who is going to do what before we all decide that.
It's like politics, then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not anything to do with voting on new members, admitting new members into the lodge. A different voting process, by the way.
So you have like your monthly meeting where you do like the housekeeping.
Sure.
What are like the things you do outside of that? Where do you learn about the esoteric stuff?
That is what we would refer to as Masonic education. And that is something which is up to the members of the lodge to facilitate. And this can be anything from how to change a flat tire and balance your banking account or checkbook to what exactly does the square and compass represent, and how can we break it down metaphysically, right? So it's really depends on the culture of the lodge in the area in which you join, which is why I would suggest anybody looking to do so reach out to your local lodges, and they probably have a dinner of some sort. Go and meet with the guys first and get a feel about, just soak up some vibes and feel it out first, right? Just not because it's going to be bad or anything, just you want to make sure it's the right fit for you, right? Some lodges can be more blue collar, some can be more white collar. It's very eclectic. There are ones that focus more on education. So if you're interested in something like that, it's going to be easy to spot which ones are talking about the more esoteric topics and which ones are more not worried about, but more kind of focused on pancake breakfasts and, parades, right? So, which, they ideally every lodge would do everything, right? But there's only so many talents that everybody possesses, right? So
I didn't realize there'd be that much sort of discrepancy between different lodges, like how they operate and what they focus on and stuff. I thought it'd be more hegemonic. Is that a word? I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah, the other meetings really are rehearsals, from my experience, to put on the degrees to initiate new members that want to join. So when you step into an officer, you step into the officer line, you are expected to help, usher in new people and guide them through, what you experienced going through. So you have to memorize more stuff. It's not just the question and answers sequence in order to progress to the degree to get to Master Mason. You then have to go back and memorize maybe a lecture about the apron or working tools or, the whole question and answer sequence that you had to memorize to get to a next degree is included in the degree. So you can memorize that even more if you wanted to, right? So it's they're really amateur actors when it comes to putting on degrees in the lodge room. Like I was lucky enough to have an organist in mine, so I had organ music as I was, walking around.
Dun, 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 dun. No.
But again, I was in a big old building and it happened to be there. So you're not going to find that in every lodge room. So it really depends on, the locale.
Yeah.
How? Sorry, go on. We're going to say something then.
No, I was just going to say, which is why I think it's so interesting, masonry over in the UK, because you guys have got old buildings and shit over there. So the culture is much more, I don't know, friendly to fraternal organizations like that. I think that it's, I don't know if I'm wrong about that or not, but it just seems, I mean, it came over from America, from England. So we have roots over there. We all, in order to be considered not a clandestine lodge, you have to trace your roots back to, your charter has to come from a lodge that has its charter from a lodge that has its charter from, and so back and so forth to the Grand Lodge of England, or I guess Holland, right? So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the apron there. So so some lodges they'll have that, they'll pick a part of the regalia or something, and then like do sort of lectures or lessons on what this actually means, because you think of a stonemason and apron, well, it's probably got tool pouches for your tools, and it stops you getting, chips of stone, beating your crotch, protects your genitals.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. When you testify,
it
covers your testicles.
Covers your testicles
That's
when you
something
testify.
we learned.
So is there some sort of deeper symbolic significance to the apron itself?
Yeah. I know that the aprons kind of work a little differently over in the UK, as far as like the decorations, regalia on it go. But what we get when we are raised to the sublime degree of a Master Mason is a plain white apron. And we keep that tucked away, and it will be put on our casket if we so wish when we die. So that is the role of the apron, at least in a practical sense. The ones that we use in lodge are just kept at the lodge, right? And they're just kept there. So I think over in the UK, the apron might be a little bit more like personal, and I don't know. I think it might look a little bit cool, more cool looking, but
they tend to be sort of sky blue, and they have a lot of sort of fancy embroidery on them, like gold thread embroidery or silver thread embroidery on them. They're very ornate, very decorative pieces of apparel. They're definitely not plain white.
Yeah, I've got a little snippet in this book about the apron. You want me to read it real quick?
Yeah.
It says it's the badge of a Mason. The lambskin or white leather apron is an emblem of innocence and the badge of a Mason. More ancient than the golden fleece or Roman eagle. More honorable than the star and garter or any other order that could be conferred upon you at this time or any future period by king, prince, potentate, or any other person except he be a Mason. I hope you will wear it with equal pleasure to myself, or to yourself, and to honor the fraternity. So that is actually an excerpt from the ritual itself. So
right, giving out secrets away, Bill.
Yeah,
it's in this book, and I was given permission to read from this book.
So so the material that it's made of is significant. It's lamb's skin. The lamb is innocent. It's pure. There are sacrificial connotations to Passover lamb. Yeah. So these things aren't chosen by accident, or are they? Maybe they are, and then we can just extrapolate all this meaning from it. It's hard to tell sometimes, isn't it? What other regalia? Well, what else do you, other than white gloves? Do you have white gloves over there in the States?
I've only ever worn those for funeral services, and that's more just to look fancy, right? To look, you wear a suit and tie to a funeral, put some white gloves on, you're a step above everyone else, right?
I'm sure there is some symbolic reasons for the white gloves, and some sort of similar ideas, signs of purity or cleanliness or something like that. I'm guessing there must be a deeper meaning.
Probably.
I wouldn't know.
I don't have anything that comes off the top of my head.
You haven't done that degree yet. How many degrees have you done?
Well, the interesting thing is, to get your 32nd degree in Scottish Rite, you don't actually have to go through all 32 degrees. So you go through 1 through 3, which is Master Mason, and then from there, there's 4 the Scottish Rite is broken down into 4 subcategories of degrees, and each category doesn't have the same number of degrees, so it makes it even more confusing. But essentially, you have to watch 1 degree from each subcategory before you can get your 32nd degree.
Right. So you need to do your first 3 and then another 4 minimum?
Yeah, and then the 32nd will be after
Right.
that. So it'd be 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so 8. I can do math. Yeah, 8.
And like, how much, say you wanted to pick one of these sort of extra degrees over and above the 3rd degree, how much sort of time are we talking about? How much time do you have to commit to be able to do that?
Well, the Scottish Rite degrees are plays. So you sit there and you watch them. So maybe, depending on the degree, it could take anywhere from 15 minutes to 45 minutes. Or, if they want to get like super extravagant and, use a bunch of props and whatnot, or even host it outside, go to a different location, it could take, hours. So
The actual ritual can take hours.
well, it's a play. It tells
Yeah.
a story. It's not a ritual so much as you're watching a movie. Like they literally have these on DVDs that people can sit in a room and watch and say that you've got your, 17th degree or whatever, right?
Who
So-
filmed that? And
Yeah.
who are the actors in it? Like,
Regular Masons, at least in the state of Indiana. I mean,
right.
just, we put it together for ourselves because
Right,
a
okay.
lot of people don't have time to do this anymore. Like, who has the time to be an amateur actor in between working 9 to 5 and doing whatever else you got to do, right?
Yeah, true.
But back in the day, you did, right? Like, especially in the wintertime, like it is here, or over there too. I'm guessing it's still cold and snowy out the window, but like, if you're not plowing the field, you got nothing else to do but sit inside and come up with plays, right?
Yeah, we had so much fewer distractions.
That's the
A
other
couple
thing,
of hundred
isn't it?
years ago,
Mm.
most of us couldn't read. There's no TV. There's no radio, no internet.
Yeah.
Let's make up some mystery plays. It sounds like fun.
Let's make up some esoteric plays.
Yeah. What else are we going to do? What are you going to do?
Shag, probably.
Oh, boring. Fuck. Well, we're rocking up past an hour already. I'm just checking the clock now. We've gone over an hour already, Bill. I believe how quick it goes.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say before we go about 13 questions or anything?
About 13 questions.
Well, I'll just say it if you want to plug your podcast, whatever.
I thought you, yeah.
Yeah, we did it already, but you do it again.
Aside from dude, I love talking about weird stuff, about about kind
Weird
of things.
stuff
So
to
I thought
weird
I'd pop
people.
over. What's that?
What's that?
No, I was just saying, sorry, you're talking to weird people
Yes.
and
Yeah,
about weird
great.
things. Yeah.
Are you allowed to say, like, what you've got in the pipeline with 13 questions, what you've got in the can
Sure.
or coming up?
Yeah. Aside from the Keith Abraham episode that should be dropping, hopefully by the time this gets published, it'll be out already. But this week, we have 2 recording episodes, which is unusual because I usually try to keep it to once a week. But on Tuesday, we are supposed to be recording with Mike Romanelli Jr., who is an owner of a comedy club here in New Jersey, I believe, somewhere on the west or on the East Coast. I'm in Michigan, so I'm not different, same time zone, but far away. And so anyway, Mike Romanelli Jr. is on Tuesday, and then we have another guest recording set up, Denver Michaels, who is a kind of a crypto researcher, cryptozoologist.
Oh, wow.
Those are
Zoology,
good.
yeah. So he talks about giants. So I'm sure, hopefully, maybe that'll come up on 13 questions, which is, I don't get to talk about this kind of stuff on 13 questions. So I love, thanks for the opportunity for me to come on and talk your guys' ears off about it.
No, it's no problem. I
That's
like hearing about Freemasonry from the inside. And I appreciate your candor It's in this weird sort of realm of conspiracy and stuff. Freemasonry is a touchy subject for a lot of people. And so appreciate you, coming forward and being honest and telling us about it.
Yeah, I thought you might have to have your eyes gouged out or something now.
No, that's actually not one of the.
There's one where you are like ripped in two down the center or something.
Yeah. That's for the third one. That's the worst.
Yeah,
serious business.
Yeah,
there are serious punishments for breaking your oaths.
You get ripped in half.
Yeah.
Oh no.
You're pulled in two different directions. A house divided itself cannot stand.
Ouch.
Like a pair of Levi's.
But yeah, so thanks. Being candid about it, and I know that it is a third rail topic, and it's weird. I mean, that's why I did it. Honestly, is because I wanted to figure out, is there anything weird going on here? And there's not. It's just a bunch of guys sitting around their local lodges talking about stuff, and maybe serving some pancakes and raising funds for widows and orphans. Right? You got to really search to find the people that are more interested in the esoteric side.
Yeah, I think I described it the same way last week. Most people are there for social reasons or networking or, I think there's a lot read into it that it doesn't help because it's been secretive over the decades and people see it as not exclusive isn't the right word, but wherever there is mystery and intrigue, there's always going to be speculation, and that's just the way it goes, I'm afraid. So, join up if you think it's all about Baphomet and his boobies. Sign up and have a look. All right, Bill, we'll let you go. Links in the show notes. Eavesdroppers, check it out. If you've got room in your rotation, subscribe to 13 Questions and you get loads of good blokes there telling their stories, and we've been having a lot of cross-pollination with our guests and stuff. Like we had Owen Hunt on last week. You had Guy Murray on a month or two ago. So it's nice. It's nice hearing different perspectives from different people and what they've learned, and it's great. Check it out. All right. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Bill. We'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Who knows where?
Let's keep in touch, man.
Absolutely.
We'll talk later.
Yeah.
Cheers, Bill.
All right, stay on the line for us for 2 seconds while we play ourselves out, and we'll catch you fuckers on the flip side for some housekeeping and some news. Yeah?
For reals.
For real.